Thank you very much. Thank you.
So from Hong Kong, and Hong Kong for the last generation,
I'm
you have a choice.
BasilMarceau.com, the Republican candidate
I did
for
not
governor.
have sexual relations
And
with
I
that woman.
realized that this is something
Miss
he
Lewinsky.
is
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey, good morning, Clevelanders. Glad to be back in town. I've been up in Washington all week where the real politicians hang out. Anyway, glad to be back in here this morning. Got Franklin Chansey here with us, of course. John Stanberry couldn't make it this morning, so he has sent a special guest in this morning that we're proud to have. She's the 9th District Committee woman for the State Republican Party, Miss Emily Beatty. Good morning, Emily.
Good morning.
Well, that makes for an optimistic start to the day, doesn't it?
Now, Emily, of course, is daughter of Vicki and Keith Beatty. That's some friends of mine.
Did you have to announce
I
that?
did. I
Yeah.
wanted to announce it. Is Mama or Dad listening this morning by chance?
Oh, they might be, yes.
Well, good morning.
Might be.
Good morning. Yeah, I've known them for a lot of years. Your mom's a retired school teacher now, isn't she?
Yes, she is.
How's she enjoying the retired life?
Well, she's on this county school board, so I don't know how
Nah,
retired
that's not
you
very
could
retired. That's
really.
right.
She thought it was going to be a retirement, but and something to keep her busy. But I think it's turned into a full-time job.
Now, have you been talking to your mama about issues with the county school board or anything?
I'm going to be honest, and anyone that knows my mother knows this to be true. We've always tried to separate our relationship, and we try not to talk about some of those things. I have my opinions, and she has hers, and sometimes we agree, and sometimes we don't. So
Well, now, you have some Charleston roots, though. Is that right?
I do.
And that means that down deep in your soul, you don't like to talk about the fact that there are Democrats in the family, aren't there?
Oh, I don't know that there are any Democrats in my family. My mother and father moved to Charleston.
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah.
They were natives.
Well,
All right.
I will tell you a story. I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. We used to go in to vote when we voted at the old Charleston High School, and they would all say, the poll workers say, there's one of our 3 Republicans, and that was me, my mother, and my father. When we would come in the door, they knew who we were. So, yes, there are some Democrats in Charleston.
Yeah.
Well,
Real quickly,
Go ahead.
before we get into any other things, though, like everybody to remember in their thoughts and prayers, the family of Benji Riggs. He's a long-term stalwart here in the community, worked with the rescue squad for 30 or 40 years, was a photographer for the Banner for
Yes.
all those years. Passed away, unfortunately, a couple days ago. Also a former chairman of the Bradley County Democratic Party. But a tough time for his family, and we were thinking about them today.
yeah. How old was Benny?
About 60.
Was he? Well, that's a shame. I if you've been around Bradley County for a long time, you've seen him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, nice guy. Anyway, I've been gone a lot. Emily, you told me you got a new baby, so you haven't been keeping up with a lot of the news lately and all
I
this.
know. I don't know that I'm the best fill-in for John. I have a 6-month-old, and she doesn't like it when I try to watch television or read the newspaper, so I try to keep up with it as much as I can.
Well, anyway, we're going to try to do the best, and I'm sure Franklin's going to be really nice to you. He's always really nice to the girls when they come around.
Well, if it makes it any better, John did have very nice things to say about you. He really did.
You can't tell on the radio, but I'm blushing.
He is John, if you're somewhere listening to this on the internet.
Well, let's start with just kind of a basic question, opening it up. Should we sell TVA or not?
Boy, that's a tough question. And interestingly enough, one that doesn't really have an easy Republican or Democratic answer.
No.
There are a lot of folks in this area who would be violently opposed to selling TVA, even though that's a small government idea. It certainly would affect our utility rates. Most people think they would probably go up. TVA's certainly been maybe the biggest engine of economic development in the Southeast over the last 75 years. So, all in all, I'd probably say no.
Well,
well, that's shocking. I thought you'd be all over selling it. Go ahead.
Well, and I agree with Franklin. I think this is my personal opinion. Of course, we have Corker and Alexander both saying, even just talking about selling TVA affects the bond prices and things that affect us here in our community. And I do think it could be in this economy, especially when we talk about energy prices. I think it's very important that we be careful about what we're saying.
In other words, Tennesseans are saving money, but now then we're selling the power off. Do you think we'll just start bundling some of this up and selling it to Georgia?
Well, Georgia gets some.
I mean, do you think we ought to ship them a little water down there? Maybe they'll leave us alone.
Well, now water's a different story.
We generate our power.
That's a natural resource.
We generate our water, our power, a lot of our power with the water. Of course, we have
abundant resources.
Yeah, we have abundant resources, but Georgia's been heavily pressed to get our water, and actually wanting to take us to court and bring up some laws from the 1700s or something.
Well, they're trying, but I don't expect them to get very
far. But there's a little corner, when I go towards Nashville, Tennessee, there's a little corner there that's got Georgia's name on it.
Yes.
And it's down there by the river, pretty close to the river. It looked like we could just almost pipe them a little bit over there to
Well, that's actually
Georgia
what
line.
they want. They want us to give them access to the river at that location.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me like we ought to do it. Can't we sell it to them, make a little money ourselves?
Well, apparently the folks downriver are not too keen on that idea, on that water that would be diverted before it gets to them going to Georgia.
Yeah, you're saying the Tennessee people wouldn't like it.
No, well, the Tennessee people don't like the idea of us giving up territory and control over our property, but the people downriver, maybe in Alabama, for example, they're concerned about the idea that the water wouldn't be getting to them.
Well, maybe Georgia ought to sue Alabama.
This is kind of getting a slippery slope here.
I think Tennessee fans all over the region would be for that.
Well, I think we
Roll Tide, by the way.
That's right. I think we ought to sell it to them by the gallon. Who ever thought we'd be buying water by the bottle? And in the old days,
and it costs more than gasoline.
Emily, that's probably way before your time, but we never used to buy water.
No, unfortunately, I remember not having bottled water.
These grandfathers and stuff, if they come back and sit on the front porch these days and sit and rock, they'd say, "They what? They what? They what?" about a lot of things that we do these days. Anyway, the next thing I'll bring up is Desjardins. What's going on here now? He's paid fines, and I haven't been keeping up with Franklin. I know you have, so bring me up to date with. He's paid some fines.
The State Board of Medical Examiners imposed the whopping fine of $500 per patient that he had admitted to have engaged in inappropriate relations with patients.
So he got fined $500.
Yeah.
For having an affair with somebody.
With a patient of his medical practice. That was the violation. It wasn't that it was an affair. It was that he was having these relationships with people who were coming to him for medical care.
Okay.
And there were two of them that he had admitted to. I think those were both individuals whose story came out in Mr. Desjardins' divorce trial. And so, based upon that investigation, they gave him a $500 fine. No other penalty
Now, there's
imposed.
something morally wrong probably with that, since he was married and everything, but what is there criminally wrong with it?
Well, there are rules against physicians engaging in relationships with patients because it's presumed to be a conflict of interest, if you will. You're not really looking out for the patient's best interest at that point. Maybe you're looking out for your own.
There's a gray area here. I'm not sure where it is, but, I just can't see what, in other words, if I'm treating you for, let's say, high blood pressure, and then we start hitting it off and going out a few times or something like that, there's something wrong with that?
I don't know that that's exactly what these allegations are about.
Well, it's a little more complicated in that. And one of these individuals, I believe, he urged them to get an abortion, as I recall. This is all most relevant just because of his previous claims to be such a conservative. You know, very pro-life, so he said, pro-family, conservative values. It just doesn't appear that the walking meets the talking in Congressman DesJarlais'
well, and
world.
let me say this too. I think that everyone makes mistakes in their life, and if you make a mistake, you can change. You can change your viewpoints. I think that the biggest problem here is that he didn't come out and say initially and say, I've made some mistakes, I've changed, I'm sorry. Things really got out of hand and the story just kept snowballing before he actually came out and made a statement. I think that is one of the things that's really hurt him in a lot of this, and why this story continues to go on and on and on is because he didn't come out and say, look, I've made mistakes, I'm sorry. I've changed my viewpoints. I don't necessarily, there's no question to me that I think that he does believe those things. I think he just has not handled this situation in the proper way. And I think it will be an interesting election cycle next year in that race.
He's got a lot of people coming after him in that race, hasn't he?
Yes, he does.
Republicans against Republicans.
Yes. And as a Republican, I really do not have a lot to say about the things he's done in Washington for us. I'm very pleased with his record. But this is going to be an issue in his next campaign, just as it was this past time. It's just going to be according to if people take him at his word that he has actually changed and believes those things.
It'll be interesting to see what these other candidates have to say about
yes, it will.
Congressman DesJarlais when they're running in this primary. I have a feeling they won't be nearly as kind as Emily just was.
Well, I do. Well, but see, though, this is something too that I do. I do have some Democrat friends, believe it or not, and we talk about this sort of thing all the time. And I'm like, look, you are so forgiving of things that people do all of the time, but when a Republican makes a mistake, it's somehow a bigger mistake than if a Democrat had made a mistake.
You want to know why that is?
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah.
the difference.
Why is a Republican state? Let me get this question right now. You're saying that a Republican mistake is always a bigger mistake than a Democratic mistake?
No, she asked why Democrats are less forgiving of that.
Okay, all right.
And the answer is because we generally didn't run on the platform of being more moral or more conservative, saying that we're the family values party and so forth. We have every flaw, and maybe more sometimes, than our Republican counterparts. But I think in terms of the way we're presenting ourselves to the public, we don't tend to emphasize those areas and those failings.
You don't. In other words, the Democrats don't. They don't carry.
We embrace our hypocrisy rather than
well, and I understand your point about that, but also, aren't you supposed to be the party of tolerance? That's what I hear a lot too from my Democrat friends. We're the party of tolerance. We're the party of tolerance. But oh boy, that Republican made a mistake, and we're really going to talk about this a lot. I just
it's definitely our lesser angels. Honestly,
sure.
It's somewhat human nature, but we see folks we have watched campaign and say that they're representing our values, our morals, so forth, and then we see these lapses on their part, and I suppose that there's a lesser part of us that feels elated about that.
Yeah,
it may not be the nice or the moral thing, but that's what happens.
Well, at least you're honest.
If Republicans were just campaigning on the idea that we're fiscal conservatives, or we're for strong defense, or even we're pro-life, okay, that would be fine. But the idea that they've somehow married themselves to the church, for example, I think is offensive to a lot of us on the other side, but it also calls.
But are you saying you never go to church?
No, I go to church all the time.
Okay, keep talking then.
But I don't claim that as a Democrat we're the party of God, and that's frequently happened with the folks on the Republican Party. Not necessarily present company here, but that's something that's happened.
The party of God.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happened.
That's a pretty strong statement.
Hey, I'm
I didn't know
perfectly
that
fine
the
with being the
Republicans
party
were
of
the
God.
party of God.
Oh, they've claimed to be.
What are the Democrats in?
Just ordinary Joes.
But they're not the party of God.
I think we're individuals pursuing our personal salvation the way we're supposed to. We just don't claim it as a party that it somehow that we're more moral. And I think that's exactly what's happened. You had the moral majority.
Do you think
all
that
these folks,
do you think the Republicans do claim that, or do you think the Democrats try to push that off on
Oh
the
no, I
Republicans?
absolutely think that.
Why?
Well,
Give me an example.
the rise of the moral majority, Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, all those people. I personally think it was very bad for religion and very bad for politics when those folks got together and teamed up. Because
started putting on their television
because it
shows.
actually demeans faith, but it also calls into question these individuals when we're never going to elect politicians in either party who aren't going to have some personal failings along the way.
Well,
that's not a reasonable expectation for any of us to happen. But
church and state should not be mixed.
I agree with that.
Well, I agree with that too. I do think it's hard, though, for someone who is of faith to separate their personal beliefs from decisions they make. I think it's a vehicle that people use to make decisions
Agreed.
about right and wrong.
Agreed.
And in this coming back to Desjardins, I just find it kind of ironic. You know, when you say the party of God, I don't think any of the Republicans I know think that God is a Republican or a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you.
Really, Franklin, I don't.
Have you been to a church service in the last 10 years where somebody from a pulpit referenced that they had a voter guide out on the windshields of the cars? I have.
Well,
you know what? There weren't any Democrats.
I had
on that list.
I'll be honest with you, Franklin, and this is very unusual in the church I go to, but they had a fill-in priest one day came up and made some statements that criticizing the Republican side. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen that priest back in our church, I can tell you that. But
well,
and I don't know that I think
for not necessarily the same reasons. See, I just don't think it's appropriate for them to be taking either of those parts in that role there. Outside, church service is over. Your minister becomes an ordinary citizen. Get out there and say whatever you want. Get out and work in a political campaign if you want to. There's a time and a place for that. I've never felt that standing up there delivering the sermon is the time. I'm not sure that it's always clear which candidate God would pick. You know.
Well, no, but one thing that I do think that needs to be pointed out, though, in regards to this is, I think sometimes this is happening because the Democrats have gone so far to the left that they are not representing what a pastor or the membership of a church believes. And so they're naturally gravitating towards the Republican Party and Republican candidates. I've never been to a church service where someone has stood up and said, you need to vote for XYZ. Now, maybe you have. I don't know. But I do think that, you know, when you're talking about the moral majority and those sorts of things.
Democratic churches?
No, certainly was not.
Now, wait a minute. Can you share with us what church?
No, I will tell you it was a Baptist church.
Okay.
I won't out the specific congregation.
Was it in this town or another
It was
town?
in this town.
Oh, and now we're getting close.
We're getting
hot
closer.
now.
We might have it by the end of the program. But,
Well, this is Cleveland, Tennessee. I only narrowed it down to 150 churches there.
well, but you do have to realize, though, that church, religion is a big part of the Republican Party.
It's a big part of the Democratic Party.
Well, and
you
I'm
may not think so.
No, but what I'm saying is, it is a big part, and that it's okay that we feel that way. I mean, it's okay that we gravitate towards a party because of our beliefs. There's nothing wrong with that.
I don't disagree with that.
We better get off this subject.
Okay.
My next question is having a 501c for a political group right or wrong?
They shouldn't be available at all for any party, either side.
That's kind of what I think. But it seems to be there's a lot of problems going on now with
Sure.
these 501Cs being issued for these political groups.
Yeah.
And, a lot of it's Tea Parties and some of these type of things. But
Sure. But it should not happen.
Now then, I'm trying to. They're trying to do this so they can raise tax-free money.
Yeah.
And spend it tax-free. Now this is for
For
Democrats or Republicans.
Absolutely.
But
that issue goes across both sides.
yeah,
what you're
I
talking
always thought a 501c3 was for a.
about. Well, these are 501c4s
Okay.
that we're talking about.
All right.
501c4s are supposed to be under the rule something called a social welfare organization, and they're not supposed to be engaging in direct political activity. Now, interestingly enough, I'll give you, from my perspective, the most glaring example of that would be Karl Rove's Crossroads USA group that spent $70 million in campaigns this past year.
Right.
Now, it's not a surprise to me which candidates that Karl Rove is advocating for. I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem with them getting a tax-exempt status to do it. The idea that Crossroads was a social welfare organization and not a political advocacy group is just silly. There's nothing wrong with him advocating and raising money and doing that sort of things. I just don't see any reason why there'd be special tax advantages. And I would say the same thing about MoveOn.org or any of these
That's
other.
what I was about to
any
say.
other groups. There shouldn't be any tax exempt status for these types of organizations.
Right, and let me say this too. I think really the root of this problem is campaign finance and campaign finance reform.
Right.
Let's let individuals give as much money as they want to a candidate. That would stop these super PACs, because what happens when you get this classification under the law, what Franklin said is mostly right, but under the law, it's a social welfare organization, but the law actually states that they cannot be primarily, their activities cannot be primarily to help political candidates or be engaged in political activities. Primarily that's a gray line. It's blurred. No one really knows what that means. So what's happened when we had all of this reform and individuals can't give to a political candidate as much as they want, they'll give to a super PAC. Those super PACs do not have to disclose all of their donors. They can run ads for candidates on both sides, because both sides have these groups. We all know during political seasons, the last two presidential elections, it has jumped significantly. The ads, the negativity, and the candidates will come out and say, "Oh, I didn't run that ad. The PAC ran the ad. I had nothing to do with that."
Absolutely.
That disgusts me, and it disgusts me on both sides. Let's just get the IRS out of the way. Let's let people fully disclose who they're giving money to and give it directly to the candidate. We would kind of cut out all of this mess. The problem that I'm not taking up for the IRS in any means,
Please
but the
don't.
problem with the IRS is they are taxed, so to speak, with policing these organizations. So when you have this big gray area, how do you police these type of organizations? It's just too much of a gray area. And then on top of that, the scandal is really about the filtering mechanism that they use to go after these groups. They were targeting certain groups and not going after and asking questions of other groups. That's the real problem in the scandal. But these groups and the campaign finance reform is really the root of this entire problem.
It goes back to the Supreme Court decision in Citizens
United.
United. Which got rid of all these limitations that previously were created by legislation, and created a new breed of problem.
Well, and basically that decision said they could pretty much do anything that they wanted as long as it was primarily. Is that you're an attorney, I'm not. Is that really what that ruling said?
Well, it had to do with some. There was the McCain-Feingold,
Sure.
Which was a bipartisan bill, all right, which put limits on how much money could be given by corporations and other individuals to specific political campaigns. That was struck down by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional. And that's what opened the door for all this creativity in in pursuing these matters.
Well, and this came actually from the IG report. In 2009, there were 1,751 applications for a 501c4 organization. In 2012, there were 3,357. So this is not going to stop until we get the government out of the way and allow people as individuals to give to candidates directly.
I think we need to use the Barney Fife method. Let's nip it in the butt. What do you think? Yeah. I mean, there's a problem there, and how long does it take us to fix problems in America?
Well, you have a lot of money at this point who have a vested interest in maintaining that system right now because they like to be able to influence elections and outcomes and so forth. So it's going to be
it's a job creation. You think it's better than one of those stimulus programs like Cash for Clunkers? I bet it created more money.
Well, certainly if you were in the advertising business, it did.
Well, I think, and I read this somewhere, I don't have it right in front of me, but in the last political campaign, I think I think there was $315 million spent by these groups in the last campaign, and that had doubled from the previous presidential campaign. I mean, it's just gotten out of hand. Let's just be transparent. Obama administration loves that word. Let's just all be transparent, and let's just let people give what they want to give to a candidate, and let's fully disclose it.
You got a lot of these groups whose opposition to that idea is not the unlimited amounts of gifts. It's the disclosure they don't want.
Sure.
They don't want to disclose who gave the money because that becomes a campaign issue here. I got to say, although I'm not convinced necessarily that that's the best approach, I like that approach more than I like the current system.
Sure.
Is this a Democratic or a Republican issue?
Depends on who's in power at the time. Honestly.
Yeah, I do. And I think it's both.
Money tends to follow whoever's winning. So in the last cycle, what'd you have? You had more presidential giving to the Democratic side, and you had more 501c4 giving on the Republican side because they had the House and they thought they would be taking the Senate at that point. So that's where the money was going.
Well, and you know, it's really not a Republican or a Democratic issue because it happens on both sides. Like MoveOn.org, if you go to their website, it's right on their front page that in their mission statement, so to speak, that they are trying to, forward the Obama agenda and the legislative agenda of President Obama. And that's wrong. That's not what these groups are supposed to be.
We completely agree about that point, that the 501c4 concept is a sham.
Yes.
Well, we're fixing to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some fracking rules in California and air coder. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. Whoop FM.